barges for moderately
you were
priced
live.
housing.
All righty.
That's a good
Okay,
one.
welcome everybody to the September 7th Annapolis Planning Commission meeting. And I will call the meeting to order. Chair Alex Pine will call the meeting to order. Could we have the roll call, please, Kimberly?
Mr. Pline,
Present.
Ms. Pico,
Here.
Present.
Ms.
Oh,
Butler,
sorry. Here, sorry, I had somebody walk in.
Mr. Waldman,
Present, thank you.
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Imes.
Here.
We're not expecting Mr. Svakianudis, so we have 6 members present.
Great, thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I can display that, but it's pretty simple. We only have 2 items: approval of meeting minutes, and then our continuation of our Annapolis Ahead 2040 Comprehensive Plan public hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Great,
Second.
we have a second. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next order of business is approval of the minutes from August 17th. Kimberly sent those around a couple of weeks ago. I don't think I have to necessarily display them because we just, I trust everybody's had a chance
We
to
did much of nothing.
look those over.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, great. I mean, what the thing that's of interest there to many people, maybe to people outside, is all of the comments that were submitted through other places. When there were public meetings, all of those comments were given to us, and we've entered all of those into the record. So they're now officially part of the Planning Commission record. So we have a second for the approval of minutes.
Second,
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Great. Thank you, Kimberly, for getting those out. Appreciate it. Okay. So now on to the meat of our agenda tonight is continuation of the 90-day public review period. So just a couple of comments about that. So we have this meeting and our next meeting that will be on the 21st, 2 weeks. And that will be after the 90-day period in which we'll close the public hearing. So if there's anybody in the public that wants to testify to us specifically, I don't think there's anybody signed up tonight, but next meeting in 2 weeks will be the last chance to do it at one of our meetings. There'll be plenty of time to further comment on the comprehensive plan, because once we're done with our recommendation, that still has the whole city council process to go through. So this is just the beginning of the process. So there's plenty of time for people to continue to comment. So that's kind of on the agenda, coming up. And so we have today, we have Mr. Shinsky is here, and he wanted to make a few comments based on a number of questions they've been getting at the public meetings. So I think it would be appropriate if Eric comes on and sort of addresses these three themes that have been coming up at the public meetings, just both for our benefit and for anybody listening. So are you set, Eric?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You want me to sort of ask you, or you want to just jump in, or how do you want to do that?
I can jump in. I mean, I want to clarify, for the record, Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. I'm here primarily tonight just to be available if questions come up. So, I'll probably be off camera after this beginning part. But yeah, I wanted just to share, I only need a few minutes here. We've been doing a number of public events to reach community members in different settings, virtually, in person. We've gotten a lot of comments through the website and other direct emails, et cetera. And so there's 3 topics that I wanted to try to clarify a little bit more before you all continue your discussion. So let me pull up this presentation and too long.
I like how the sidewalk is so open and there's no cafe chairs in the way there. You really picked that picture. Nice.
It's Photoshop.
Yeah. I like the cafes, let's be honest. It's good stuff. A little oppressive at times.
There must be a delay here. Hold on just a second. Let me turn my video off. 1 second. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. These are the 3 topics. These are, I would say, very fundamental elements of the draft comprehensive plan. We've been having a number of conversations with folks to try to, clarify what the intent is with these. So let me dive right in. Mixed use is something that folks who are reading the draft plan are going to see in our future land use map. Here we're looking at pages 78 and 79 in the chapter 4, the land use chapter. The red shaded areas are designated as mixed use development or mixed development. We've had mixed development in future land use maps and all of our comprehensive plans going back decades, in some form or another. In this one, it's important, we are doing probably more mixed use in this plan proposed in our future land use map than we have in the past. It's really a function of the sort of economic and cultural time that we're in and what the goals are for the comprehensive plan. So we have a spread here on pages 84 and 85 in the same chapter that really explains why mixed use, why now, why is this a signature recommendation of the plan? And this is what we say, I'm not going to, well, maybe I will read it. Okay. Annapolis has a long history of successful mixed use development in downtown and Eastport. And I would probably add, Inner West Street, but since the inception of its zoning code in the 1960s, the city has had relatively little area identified specifically as mixed use in its future land use map or zoning map. And I'll talk about the difference between those in a moment. This is primarily due to the suburban expansion of the city, which favored strict separation of uses. In developing this plan, there was a strong consensus among residents that mixed-use development is needed to better address current goals, including more walkable communities, sustainable and resilient natural resources, economic and community development, and cultural preservation. Mixed-use development is able to address these seemingly disparate goals because it is the most efficient use of the city's limited land, allowing for the joining of compatible land uses on smaller development footprints that then require fewer resources to be serviced. Designated areas for mixed-use development does not dictate what they will be, simply provides more flexibility to adapt to changing needs. So I want to elaborate on the last 2 sentences here to say that in addition to mixed use requiring fewer resources to service, it really puts people closer to the things they need. So it's just a much more efficient and sustainable way of building. Ultimately, if there's more mixed use, you can imagine shorter distances for emergency vehicles to service properties in the city, less pavement, shorter runs of utility lines underground. That's just a kind of well-documented fact about mixed-use development. It just puts things closer together and then cuts down on the costs. So that's the primary reason why we're putting more emphasis on mixed use in our future land use plan. The fact that it's mostly oriented on our major corridors is because that's where we have kind of a concentration of uses and needs today, and where we have the greatest potential to kind of put adjoining uses that could serve our neighborhoods and not impact those neighborhoods negatively. So that's also a kind of well-documented strategy for inserting mixed-use development in communities. I want to also emphasize that mixed use does not mean a particular scale of development. It certainly doesn't imply a bigger or even doesn't necessarily imply a more dense development. It simply implies more than one land use situated next to another, in close proximity to another land use that may be different. And so when you look at mixed uses that exist in the city today, there's a whole range of them all across the city. And by and large, they are on smaller footprints than other single use developments. So this is just a sampling. Number one is, bakery and office space above in Eastport on Chesapeake Avenue. Number two is an architecture office on a ground floor with 10 condo units situated around the architecture office on 4th Street in Eastport. Number three is a newer infill development on Annapolis Street in West Annapolis that has restaurant and perhaps another retail business coming in on the ground floor with, I think, 4 apartments above. And then number 4 are live work townhomes in the Annapolis Greens development off of Forest Drive with a business on the ground floor and residential above. Number 5 is Maryland Avenue, sort of a classic example of mixed use with retail on the ground floor and apartments above, different heights you can see there. They're all mixed use. And number 6 is probably the largest and most dense example. It's the Bell West Street complex at the corner of Chinkopin Round Road and West Street, which has retail at the ground floor and apartments above. But it just gives you a sense of sort of the range of mixed use types that exist. And they're all, I would say, designed to be, in context, related to their immediate environment, surroundings. And we would expect nothing less with future mixed use. And so we provide these performance standards on page 86, that in the future, the Planning Commission and community members and developers could use to determine whether a particular mixed use project is really a good project, a win for the city and for immediate neighbors. So that's really important to underscore.
Yeah, and
Second-
I'll just make the
Yeah.
add the editorial that mixed use, as you've described, is the way places were built for hundreds of years prior to about 1950.
Right.
Was when the real separation of uses really finally took hold after Ambler versus Euclid, but it took a number of years. But that's the way places were built, sort of organically. And so I'll just add that this is not really anything new. This is just Back to the Future, and it produced wonderful places. So it's it's just hard not to see how this is a good thing.
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, I have conversations with folks who want to see improvements in roadways, adjacent the major corridors of the city, Forest Drive, West Street. They want them to be safer, more walkable, and the reality is that's not going to happen unless the pattern of development changes. It's very challenging for us to make these roadways safer and more walkable when all of the development is sort of one-dimensional in designed around the automobile and with large surface parking lots and the things that don't really make for a walkable community. And so that's another aspect to it that makes it an important part of this plan. So the issue of housing options has come up. There are recommendations in this plan for how to start to expand the number of housing options in the city that go beyond a single family detached house. And so I want to start just by highlighting a map that's in the introduction of the draft plan. I think it's within the first few pages of the plan. It's this map that shows how the city has grown over time, starting from before 1800. You could see the white areas here is really the most significant expansion of the city that happened between 1951 and 1961, when Eastport and Parole and West Annapolis were all annexed into the city. I love driving around the city. I love seeing, you can kind of see the phases of the city development, from an architecture perspective. You can see the types of development that changed in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, associate shopping centers, our oldest shopping centers, from the 60s and 70s. A few of those are still around, but there was a lot in the 80s, and you see a lot of townhome development in the 1980s. And the communities between Hilltop Lane and Forest Drive in particular have an incredible variety of housing types within a small area that seem to address every imaginable household need. The era in which the city where the single family home becomes the predominant housing type in the city is actually relatively recent. It's over the last half century for a city that's nearly 400 years old. And so as we look to the future, we don't know exactly what the city is going to look like decades from now. We can try to forecast and guide that development, but the city has always adapted to changing needs and issues, circumstances, to last until today. And I think it's an impressive story when you see how the city has evolved and the way we've been able to shape the city around those needs. Today, housing affordability is a major need in the city, to the degree it wasn't 20 years ago. 10 years ago, we started to see the beginnings of that, and there's some reference to it in our last comprehensive plan. But today, it's far beyond what it was at the last comprehensive plan, and so we've done a fine-grained analysis of what our zoning currently supports in the way of housing production, and it doesn't support, for the most part, there's very little ability to build more than a single family home in the city. This map on page 125 shows in yellow the areas that are zoned for residential use, but don't allow just for a simple duplex. And in red are the commercial zoned areas that don't allow for a duplex. There's a whole range of housing types between a single family home and a large apartment complex that you might see in the Parole area, that fit compatibly within the city, that would not change the prevailing development patterns that we have today. And so we've done, a bit of an investigation of what these housing types look like that exist all over the city today, many of which could not be built based on our current zoning. These are the kinds of housing types that have defined the city for generations, and they're kind of a dying breed. And so when we talk about ways of creating more housing supply in the city, this is just a common sense strategy to go back to, in some ways, mixed use was a former strategy that was successful in the city. So was this way of building, where units are situated close to each other in such a way that they appear to be single family homes in most cases. And that was the development pattern that prevailed in the city. And so today, in the city's most desirable, exclusive neighborhoods, you have small apartment homes like these. And so we are in this draft plan suggesting strategic incremental approaches to creating more of these housing options in places where they make sense. And so the recommendations would need to come with standards to ensure that these types of houses fit compatibly within established neighborhoods. It goes without saying that, if we want to keep a certain pattern of development, we can't be arbitrary. We can't be broad brush in how we apply any kind of zoning change. It has to be strategic and deliberate, and to get the outcomes that we want. So that's what I wanted to say about the housing option recommendations. And finally, this sort of addresses both housing and mixed use. To do any of those changes, we would need to make zoning changes. The comprehensive plan is a vision document. It's really setting values and goals, what kind of city we want to live in. Doesn't change the zoning. Once it's adopted, zoning changes would have to be implemented by the city council. This comprehensive plan simply suggests the types of changes that would make sense or that we should be looking at for further study. And so in large part, the kind of zoning recommendations that are made in this comprehensive plan would involve further study and analysis, and they would certainly involve a substantial amount of community participation to be successful. This current zoning map of the city has about 31 different zoning districts. We may have more different zoning districts than just about anywhere else per square mile. I think the case is made in this comprehensive plan that we should have a zoning map that people understand, that the average homeowner, or property owner, resident, business owner can interpret, that our city council can interpret, that just about any decision maker can interpret. And today that's not really the case. So the future land use map is probably the direction that we want to go. And we want a zoning map that reflects our future land use map. Future land use sets kind of a set of priorities for how to use the land. And then the zoning map implements those ideas and tells people what they can and can't do with the property. We had a pretty basic question come up recently that I thought was a totally valid question. Somebody had, generally speaking, people have been misinterpreting the future land use map as a zoning map. It's perfectly understandable. We don't have a future zoning map in this draft comprehensive plan because we don't have any zoning changes in this comprehensive plan. We just have recommendations. But somebody thought that by looking at the future land use map, because we have one residential category, that we were looking to consolidate all residential zones into one zoning district, and that is absolutely not the case. We're just, by having one residential category on our future land use map, everything in yellow, The idea is simply to point out that we have some established residential neighborhoods that we believe are important to preserve. And it's the reason why people move here. They invest in the city. Nevertheless, those neighborhoods can evolve in time with strategic changes that won't diminish their character or their quality over time. So I wanted to make that distinction. And when
The
it does,
way-
yeah.
the way I think about the difference between the zoning map and the land use map is I see those as a third dimension
Mhm.
where the zoning map is another layer of detail down from the land use map,
Mhm.
so that if you like were to stack them on top of each other, that's kind of going from the land use map to the zoning map is sort of like drilling into more detail.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
how
that's-
I think of those.
that's a good way to think of it for sure. The zoning districts of the city have they go into far more detail than our future land use map. Finally, I just want to add that when it does come to zoning recommendations, the major recommendation is that our zoning can be far more prescriptive in the outcomes that it seeks to generate. Today, our zoning code is fairly broad, and it leads to situations where a property owner or developer might propose something that is at one end of the spectrum, and the community is a completely different expectation of what a future development might be, and takes sometimes years to come together to a project that everybody is willing to accept and support. Form-based code is a way of doing zoning that's been around for many years and is becoming increasingly adopted by different cities and counties. And it's a way of eliciting the results that we want to see and tailoring outcomes. So this diagram on the left, you can see, we have a more conventional zoning on top. The form-based code or form-based zoning would provide more standards for the kind of architecture we want to see, the scale, the detail. It has less to do with what's happening inside the building. It's not to say that we would be having an open-ended system where commercial uses could be in the middle of a residential neighborhood where they aren't today, or we would still have our uses in tables in our zoning code, but we would provide more detail, standards, guardrails, if you will, to ensure that a duplex, for example, in a neighborhood that's predominantly single family, looks like a single family detached home. That's just one example. It's easy to imagine when you look around, but again, we would need to embark on the zoning change project after the comp plan is adopted. It would be a separate initiative, and that is where we're hoping to go. But that would need city council support and community support, and we would have to move forward that way. So we did it. This is the last slide. We did a trial run of what a sort of future form-based code might look like for the commercial area of West Annapolis. And you can see the current zoning on the bottom right is this kind of puzzle of different zones that interlock, but their lines go around different properties in ways that are hard to make sense of. And, when we reconsidered zoning districts based on character of the place and the assets that are there, you end up with a zone that's just along Annapolis Street right here. We called it the Village Main Street. It sets a vision for the type of buildings that should be along now that are there today. It's also acknowledging there's an established residential area just to the north that uses this Village Main Street. The opposite in the spectrum, you have a new zone along Route Boulevard called the Village Corridor that acknowledges that Route Boulevard is a very different type of street than Annapolis. It's high volume, fast moving cars. There's the potential for larger buildings there that won't be in conflict with neighborhood residents. The Village Square District acknowledges that there's a grocery store shopping center that everybody values in the neighborhood. We want to preserve that, but there's a lot of opportunity to utilize the land there in a more efficient way. Perhaps less parking lot is needed and more open space. There could be some apartments above the grocery store and the retail there that would help make those businesses thrive. And then in between Village Main Street and the Village Corridor, you have a Village Transition Zone, which is simply transitioning in scale and density from the Village Corridor to the Village Main Street. And so the character is reflective of that. So that's form-based code as a sampling, and that's really the direction we want to go. It's in this draft comprehensive plan in terms of how our zoning would change. So you can imagine new zoning districts in different parts of the city that might reflect these types of zones here, which, I think have application in other neighborhoods. So
Yeah, I think, had there been that sort of form-based zoning along 4th Street in Eastport,
Yeah.
there might have been, a little less controversy about the development there,
I agree.
perhaps.
So that's all I wanted to share. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but I guess I'll be available, as you discuss this evening.
Well, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Eric on those specific things or anything else before we get going?
Nope.
I have a couple of quick ones, if that's okay. Eric, you still there?
Yep.
So you talked at the beginning about how single family detached housing has been a dominant form of the housing in Annapolis. And you weren't here, but BAE did a wonderful demographic study that basically says something contrary to that, which is that 37.1% of Annapolis housing units are single family detached. 40% are multifamily buildings like condos, apartments, and public and subsidized housing, and 22.6% are townhouses. So can we bake into this plan the existing conditions as we saw them from BAE, or something changed?
Diane, I need to see where you're pulling that from, because that's different than, I'm familiar with the report you're talking about, but the document that I use for the housing inventory is the 5-year housing report that our department puts together. And in that, so let me.
Yeah, I can show you the page. We actually discussed it on July 9th, 2020 at some length too, because it goes to a couple of other assumptions. Like we say for existing conditions on page 72 that Eastport remains mostly residential with single family detached housing. And I just went through 11 condos and apartment buildings in Eastport, and the number of multifamily units far outweigh single family houses in Eastport. So it kind of misconstrues in a couple places facts like that. So maybe there's a way to clarify it, and we can I can give you the reports and.
Well, no, I have the BAE report. It's a document we cite in the appendix for the draft plan. I'm pretty familiar with it, but the numbers, the number that we use from our housing study is that, the single family homes in the city is 42% of the housing units in the city. And that surprisingly, the buildings that have between 1 and 4 apartments, the sort of modest apartment dwellings of the city, only 6% of the housing units in the city. So that the emphasis I was trying to put is that it's that category, that 1 to 4 unit that frankly looks often like a single family home. That's where, just on from a practical standpoint, if we're going to try to increase the housing options in the city, it's just a sensible place to put our thoughts. I think trying to create larger apartment complexes like the kind that were created in the 70s and 80s,
Or like we're doing at Eastport Shopping
lift.
Center. Yeah, that's not what we're shooting for.
It's a much bigger lift. Yeah, I mean, there's relatively few sites in the city that could support that, and actually, the comprehensive plan identifies the few larger sites that might transition in the next 10 to 20 years, where some, more multifamily density could be supported, but by and large, more modest homes are more realistic, I would say, particularly when you think about the kind of community support that's needed. But I will certainly look at the BAE document and look at the numbers they have and kind of make sure they're consistent with what we have in the draft plan, because that we did rely on that document for a lot of particularly demographic information. So
yeah, I thought so.
And we actually use housing charts, from that. So.
The other question I had is, I was looking at page 205, which is water access, and the chart, while it does a good job of laying out where different locations are, doesn't really give you a good idea of what is water access. Is it just sitting on a park bench looking at the water, or is it actually getting in the water? And then the middle column, so park name 1 through 24 is legible, and then 15 through 28 is not legible. So that's just a formatting thing. Maybe we can just reduce the margin on the right side of the page so you can see the name of each park. But it would be helpful there to have a key, because it would be good to recognize that between Truxton Park, which is now closed to swimming, all the way to First Street, there's no place to get in the water on Eastport. And that does not come through here at all. So I would, some key that makes it clear where you can get in the water, and where it's just looking at the water, I think would be super helpful for people. And the only other comment I had was, I was looking at, on page zoning changes, had to do with Providence Point, the Village of Providence Point. It looks like that designation, the zoning designation, is going to be mixed use, but I mean, when we approved that 351 unit assisted living or facility for the aging senior living community, we specifically agreed that that would be just the senior living facility and not shops and pickleball courts and all the things that I think originally people were thinking about in there in terms of mixed use, or having just more amenities. So is that inconsistent? Are we putting something, that's page 79, something that's inconsistent with what we just did?
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, the reason why it's designated mixed use, and frankly, the footprint of that project is smaller than what we're showing as mixed use. I mean, what was approved by the Planning Commission, but it's only mixed use because assisted living is sort of oddly often characterized as commercial rather than residential, because it's kind of like, it's a concierge type of, there's a lot of services involved, and there's food service operations, that serve the residents. And so that was the thinking. But, you bring up a good point. I mean, it's a little bit, it sends the wrong message, I guess you could say. I think it will be essentially residential. So we'll look at that and see if it makes more sense to
just somehow denote that it's not, because people will freak out and say, wait a minute, I thought we just made that.
Or at least provide a note.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But again,
And then the last thing
that's a very top level classification,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean, so.
It may not be necessary. I just know that I looked at it and said, what? How could that be? But,
Yeah.
and then the last thing is, should we make the statement somewhere in this plan that this plan is fiscally neutral? I don't know. Again, you might have been here in July of 2020. Were you here yet?
Yep. That's exactly the first month I was here, July of 2020.
Because there was a big discussion at our July 9th meeting in 2020 about the fiscal impact. And so BAE did this great fiscal impact study, and it answered some of the questions that we had. But at the end of the day, what it says, you know, because we're talking about the increase in cost for infrastructure, how it's offset with revenues, and they did a fantastic job. This report was just so well done. You know, but at the end of the day, they say Annapolis Comprehensive Plan update is fiscally neutral. And I think that's just important to say to people, because I know people think by adding all these new, potentially new businesses and residences, that it's going to have a negative impact on our city. So maybe pointing that out at the beginning or somewhere in the document would be useful.
That's a great point, because that's another document that is referenced as an appendix item in this plan, and yeah, their analysis is pretty sound. I mean, it's still leaves some variability there, but yeah, I mean, the idea was to make sure that we'll have enough revenue to support the services that we have today at the same level that people expect, if not better. So,
I mean, just to play
Thank you.
devil's advocate here, can you even make a statement like that, given this is not really a plan, it's a strategic outlook? I mean, I guess you could make some wags
Assumptions.
based on,
Yeah.
you know, based on kind of like, okay, we're going to have more dense services, you know, like you mentioned earlier, less pipe, you know, all that kind of stuff. But maybe more people, so that's you know, it goes the other way. But I don't know. I think a statement like that doesn't really belong in this, because it's not. This isn't a tactical plan that says we're implementing X, Y, Z, and this is the fiscal consequence of that. I just think
Well, we spent a lot of time analyzing it, so that's. I mean, it was.
I just think you're going to get yourself in trouble, because, you know, people are going to start holding you to some broad brush statement like that. That could be interpreted many different ways. That's the danger in something like that, in a document that's not meant to do that.
Oh, I think it's sort of meant to
my
do that. I think people want to know the impact of what we're proposing in this major document that's going to guide our
Well, I mean, you
city
can make some
growth for.
broad brush statements, but I think it's a mistake to go make a statement that it's fiscally neutral.
Well, that's what our experts said, and I don't think it has to be like a chapter that actually says, here's the analysis, here's our model, here's our assumptions. You know, you can reference, I think Eric said it's referenced anyway, but I mean, it should be, I mean, even a footnote someplace here that makes the point that it's not decreasing our quality of life, essentially.
Maybe the word isn't neutral, but responsible is maybe a better term. I mean, we have, as you know, we have a new planning director who's starting on Monday. He also has been consulting on this comprehensive plan and is a real expert on comprehensive planning across Maryland. I'll definitely be getting his opinion on this as well. But I think we were aiming to be fiscally responsible in the sense of trying to create actionable recommendations that certainly some will need funding from other sources, and that would be realistic, you know, and the level of growth that we're anticipating is within the limits of our infrastructure and services. So, you know, I take the point, and you all can continue debating it. I should probably just step out of the way.
Those are just my comments. Thank you.
All right, anybody else have questions for Eric? We can always go back and ask as we talk, so, because he'll be here.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I have questions. I mostly comments, I guess. First of all, I want to praise you. It is one of the most readable reports, documents, plans that that's come across in a long time. It's extraordinarily well done, and it really covers a lot of the ideas that have been floating around for the past, 10 to 15 years or more. I found myself highlighting and putting exclamation points and yeses all over the place, noting what I thought were quotable paragraphs. I thought the whole thing, if anybody does spend the time to read it, they're going to be pretty well educated on a lot of things. And I thought that some of the things that you said about missing middle and the value of missing middle, and why that's necessary, and what multifamily housing and the history of multifamily housing, and then the stopping multifamily housing, all of that was really added a dimension that was useful. I thought that the photographs of the multifamily housing are one of your best responses to people's fears about what it's going to look like and where it's going to go. I think that I've noticed that people in my neighborhood respond very positively to form-based codes. I don't know that they really know what that means. And I think that I would suggest an insertion of an example of a form-based code from some other city that would be kind of relevant to sort of modest multifamily on a commercial boulevard. This is what Peoria, Illinois did, and they're the kinds of things that help people to understand it. But there's something fundamentally attractive about this idea of form-based codes. Another idea, and this is just kind of, I don't know, footnotey, that I really responded to is in some place about when you're talking about recreational opportunities, and why you did this environmental enhancement and recreational enhancement mapping, that you included the school system properties as potential as recreational, and they're not really considered like that. I mean, they need to be taken into a new dimension by probably the next administration, but it's a tremendous opportunity to use those public properties more as parks. I can tell you that the Germantown athletic fields are used as a park. It's really a park, and there are all kinds of different things that go on in that.
I'll piggyback on that for 10 seconds if you don't mind. Actually, by Anne Arundel County, for the high school as well as Peninsula Park, which I'm the director of facilities there, and I help out at Annapolis High School, those fields are actually considered parks for everybody's usage and owned by Anne Arundel County outside of the times of school hours and school practices. So just what you said, Bob, is exactly true. At Anne Arundel High School, every middle school, and every Peninsula Park we have in Germantown.
Yeah. And I think that, as I look around at some of these school properties, they could be really enhanced, but it would take a mayor and a county executive to collaborate with the school system to really do master planning for some of these large parcels behind Bates, Annapolis Middle, Germantown. I'm probably missing a few, and even some of the smaller ones. It's like, how can we, okay. And there are opportunities for afforestation. Really real opportunities there, because the school system does a terrible job of maintaining their buildings.
Ditto.
Terrible. Okay, but I did find myself saying yes to lots and lots of things. I think that, as it sounds like in your meetings and your presentations to different groups that you're seeing the confusions, the difference between future land use maps and zoning, the necessity to explain how we would go about actually imposing new design standards, or however we're going to, whatever you want to call them, new zonings. You know, how what would be involved as a process, and what are some examples of what it could be, and other confusions that, you know, that have arisen, as your 3 points in your first slide demonstrate, what, you know, what's coming out and what the city council is not going to understand and what's going to need. One of the things that occurs to me is that people are missing, and I get this from the comments, they're missing what the value of, quote, workforce housing, the missing middle. I would like to start with the missing middle. The value of the missing middle is crucial, you know, to the continuing health of the city. Anecdote. As I was walking I was walking through the Eastport Democratic Club last night, and it occurred to me that these are the people in the missing middle. They're the people who make up the cultural life of the city. They're the people who are the artisans. They're the people who work in the boatyards, the people who do small businesses. That's the missing middle. And somehow we need to get that point across as to the stratification of the city is poisonous. And then you can explain what workforce housing is, what affordable housing is, and what, frankly, subsidized housing is, which is a completely different category. But all I'm saying is that in if we recommend it, and as we go to the council, I'm thinking these are the things that they're going to, you know, that my neighbors are confused about, and I think that the council, who will maybe read a lot of this, they're going to want to know, you know, they need to hear this. I'm not being very specific. Now some specifics. What's imagined for Upper West Street or Outer?
So Bob, can I interrupt you for a
Yeah,
second?
sure. Go on.
I mean, if you're starting to get into questions of deliberation, can you hold that and we can go down that, or?
Sure. I guess I'm just commenting after having read, I don't know, 120 pages of this, that, this is, without getting into specifics or fixing typographical errors.
Yeah. So let's hold that, because I think I just wanted Eric to finish anything he had to say, and then
I'd like to continue commenting, if you mind. I'm not going to be long. I think that the notion of explaining people how you're going to fit the new zoning and the new design standards into granularly in neighborhoods. Visual examples help. What's imagined for Upper West Street? And in my neighborhood, what's imagined for the car dealerships? And I'll just comment that I think that the business of selling cars is going to change in the next 10 to 15 years. And you're going to buy a car and it's going to be shipped in from some other distribution center, and the need for having a lot of new car inventory on the lot is probably going to dissipate, and the need for the dealership to finance all that metal on the lot is going to dissipate. So I'm just saying, a potential for another one of those bigger parcels might be included in future land use or mixed use. In Upper West Street, I don't know. I don't know what the situation is. I didn't get a sense that you focused much on it. Okay, those are really, at this point, comments more than anything, rather than questions, because I think you've done an excellent job, certainly as you've gone along and gotten better and better at explaining this multi-layered document. And it's a guide. It's really a guide. It's not a plan, it's a guide, which helps. Okay, enough
Yeah.
said. All right, Klein, it's back to you. You have the speaker
All right.
slot.
Thanks, Eric. So please stick around just in case, as we talk some more, we have any questions for you.
Will do.
So just one other piece of business, I wanted to make sure that if Kimberly, that if you can enter the rather lengthy document that was submitted by the Maryland State Departments, lots of comments, really specific. A lot of them have to do with Maryland planning law, and I read through them all, and you know they're all very interesting. But I thought it's important that we get that entered in today's minutes as an exhibit. So I think you probably was sent that also along with all of us.
Could you send out the link to us as well? Alex?
It was sent as a very large PDF attachment.
To us?
Yes,
Yes.
Eric sent it out.
Oh, okay. I missed
I
it.
think a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Anyway, so we have that, but I just want to make sure that gets entered in the record as comments. Okay, so where we are is, you know, we have this meeting and the next meeting, and at that point we need to have a recommendation that then goes to the city council. So I, you know, as I said at our last meeting, I'd like to take the rest of this meeting and next meeting to essentially deliberate and start to come up with a recommendation. But before we go there, before we start, I think we need to assign a primary writer for the recommendation, whatever that may be. And first, let me ask if anybody wants to volunteer.
Well, why don't we sort of talk about the recommendations and assign, so we get some idea of how complicated that's going to be.
Okay. So, you know, my thought on this, and this is very much how I approached reviewing this document. You know, there are people who are, you know, the planning, you know, we're not planning professionals. You know, we don't do this for a living. And I think, for example, the comments by the Maryland Department of Planning, you know, those really addressed all of these really detailed requirements and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we've all looked at this plan enough. We've commented on it in prior iterations. So I looked at this plan kind of from a 5,000-foot level. Like, what does the document say holistically about where we're going as a city? And I personally didn't focus a lot on, you know, any one particular detail. I'm just more, you know, I was more curious of, like, what does the whole thing say? And, you know, my sense is unless we have some real strong either objection or positive comment about a particular detail, that our recommendation is more at that level than, you know, going chapter by chapter and outlining paragraph by paragraph goals, recommendations. I mean, we could end up with a 50-page document that nobody wants to write or read. So my recommendation would be keeping it at a fairly high level, 2-3 pages kind of thing. You know, what other people think?
Yeah, I think we have to keep it short because the city council they're not going to be interested in anything more than 2 or 3 pages of recommendations.
By design, it's supposed to be 5,000 feet, and then it feeds everything else, you know?
Yeah.
That gets more in the weeds for your supporting plan. So it's supposed to be that. But, you know, the fact that we haven't had a bazillion comments in recently while we've had this thing up, and it's right on the front of the city webpage when you get to it.
Yeah.
It shows that either people are just getting sick of commenting on it, or they felt they've been accommodated, you know?
Yeah, I have to disagree as far as length is concerned. I don't think we should dictate length. I mean, if you look at what the Maryland departments provided in their review, it's lengthy. because they've done their due diligence and actually reading the entire plan and providing their commentary and feedback and so on, so on. So I think it's prudent of us to do the same.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't sign off on anything more than that, 2 or 3 pages. It just, I don't think they're gonna read it, so it won't be useful. So I could do it like dissenting one and just do my own short analysis. That's probably
Well,
easy
I
to
mean,
do.
so I didn't mean to prescribe a length,
Mhm.
but just philosophically keeping the recommendation at the 5,000 feet, maybe with some specifics, certainly if there, like I said, if there are things we really wanted to highlight, either pro or con. But
Teresa,
sense is-
what do you
my
mean
sense
by,
of-
what do you mean by addressing things specifically or chapter by chapter? What do you
I
mean?
just mean that it is, as commissioners, our job is to actually read this information, provide our feedback, right? And our recommendation, pro or con, whatever that may be. Simply stating, I agree, it's fine, we have no complaints, let's go forward, here's 3 pages. Because we don't think the council is going to read it, I think it just sets a really bad precedence on, we're just gonna have short statements because we don't think it's gonna, because I don't think, if that's our belief coming into this, then we're already biased in our creation of whatever recommendations we give.
Oh, I don't agree. I know for a fact, most of the city councilmen and women that I talk to will say unequivocally that they're not going to be poring over a 20-page document. So, I mean,
As a
no matter what it is, not
commission,
just this,
we're
but I'm
supposed
just
to be
saying.
representing we're supposed to represent the city at large. So we're supposed to be adding our
course,
kind of flavor
Of
and background.
of course.
So otherwise, what's the point then, Diane? Why even have the
Exactly.
discussion and comment?
No, the point is that we should be summarizing and being helpful, not creating another document for.
Yeah, and the point is, we shouldn't even have 20 pages of comments at this point anyway. We're the ones who made this, and we've agreed with it with massive back and forth with the planning and zoning department over the last 7-8 years at least.
I'm not saying that we have to have 5 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, or a paragraph. That's irrelevant. What I'm saying is,
It is. You're right.
no, what I'm saying is saying that we are going to have a limited number of pages. I think that is, I mean, I may provide summaries and comments that'll be 10 pages by myself. Are we
Yeah,
then
I'm
going to
not saying
dismiss
that
it and
either.
say
So-
it's irrelevant because, what I'm saying? Like, I just think let's just
I
go
don't
to
think
Teresa, I
he meant
didn't-
to say
try
there's
to
a
keep it
number
short
of
and sweet.
pages, but just do a high level review is
Yeah,
sort of
I didn't mean to imply that we had to be 2 or 3 pages kind of thing, but just
That's what I heard.
well, I'm saying it was a bogey, but the idea of to keep it at a 5,000-foot view, and I agree with what Ben said. We've been interactive with the staff now for a couple of years on this, so I mean, I would hope that there's we've done that, all of that really nitty-gritty review sort of incrementally over the time that we've been working with the
Yeah,
staff.
this is our product, man. We're giving a comment against our own product. It's almost a moot point. I mean, we're the
Yeah,
ones who-
that's-
Wash his face.
that's
Come here,
exact-
Wesley.
Okay,
Woo.
I have a suggestion. I suggest that what we do is we have a summary of what our general feelings are. And that there is also, each of us take one of these sections and write what we think is required to indicate and reveal what we think about what's going on in that section. The transportation section, the recreation section, the environmental stuff. And each of us take one of those and sit down and go through that section and do the work and come up with however many paragraphs you think that it takes to represent what's the residue of our views that we've developed over the past really years of looking at applications and reading reports and, discussing these things, over and over. How's about that? We spread the work and we consolidate it into something which is, which is what will be read, and maybe some of the other stuff. But does that make sense? Is that Ms.
I think that's
Pico?
and I don't know about other people, but I went through every chapter and I have notes on every single chapter, and
Same.
it was my hope, some chapters more than others, because we all have certain wheelhouses that we that we focus on more because it's either area of expertise of it or interest, whatever. But So I agree with that, Bob. So I think probably the best thing we can do is to, go, I think we should all give some general comments tonight. And then we can have certain chapters that people can write up, and then we can bring those together. And since I didn't hear anybody sort of raising their hand to consolidate all this, I'm certainly willing to do that.
I mean, the document's supposed to stand by itself. It has its own executive summary. It has its sections. Us writing
I
again.
guess what I'm proposing is we get written, we get written comments on all these chapters from anybody who wants. We'll consolidate them, and however it comes out, it comes out.
Ben, I think we need to highlight what we
But we can also make
like or have questions about in the individual chapters. I don't think we need to repeat what's in there, but I
Yeah.
do think that we need to convey as part of our duties. I think we need to convey kind of what our consensus feelings are about the different, strategy, not chapters. You follow me?
If we have to do that, then we didn't write the document well enough to begin with.
No,
But
the alternative is to simply give them a one-word yes to the council, and I don't think that that's doing our job. I don't think that that's respecting the plan itself. I think that there may be some weak points in this that is, as each of us goes over and looks more closely at one chapter, there may some things may come out, and it's worthy of our discussion.
then we should change it.
Huh?
Then we should
That's the
change it.
point. This is a draft. Our job here is to
Right.
make recommendations, to review and make recommendations. It's in our duties. It's in our that's what we're created for, to review and make recommendations. To simply say, yeah, it captured everything. We've already talked about it. Good to go. That is not what we're here to do. We're here to make sure, did it capture everything we said? Did it miss something? Did it go into an area maybe we shouldn't explore? That is what we're supposed to be doing, deciding, discussing, and drafting. But I think, if anything, we should have learned from previous decisions that sometimes just copying and pasting or just reviewing something and giving it the green light is not the way to go.
And I don't think anyone suggested that. So let's be clear. I don't think anyone suggested
When I
that.
hear that it's already captured everything and we should keep it into 3 pages and just give our, go ahead, that's my concern, is that this is already.
No, I don't know if anyone said that either. I'm just saying we have to keep it high level. And
I'm all for
personally
high
have
level.
a problem-
Don't get me wrong. We shouldn't regurgitate all the high level, but recommendations, we can just keep it at recommendations. We've read this
keep it
thing, it's all
simple.
great, but we have one big recommendation to do X, Y, and Z.
I like the idea of doing, chapters and splitting them up. I'm fine with that.
And they can be brief. I mean, each one needs only to be 2 to 3 paragraphs. It's kind of each one is a summary and a reflection of what we think. And I think there should be you can call it what you want, an executive summary that really constellates, or what's the word I'm looking for? Our views in general.
All right, so let me propose we do this. Let's spend the rest of this evening, so maybe another hour, all going over sort of our general comments about the plan. Then we can look at the chapters and perhaps we can talk on who wants to take certain chapters to accept input from all of us on each chapter. We'll send, so say somebody takes the land use chapter, for example, we'll all send any comments on that. That one person can consolidate on each of these chapters. Then when we come back, in including the general comments, and then when we come back next time, we'll have some stuff written, consolidated from that everybody has given comments on, and then we can discuss those as sort of rough drafts and go from there. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'm not aligned with that. I think that we are here and we've convened, and there's no reason why we can't discuss here openly and have it transcribed and recorded and deliberated, and then we can split up the work of actually capturing it and putting pen to paper.
I'm just worried
concerned.
that if if we start down the path tonight of going through each chapter, we're gonna be here till midnight. Does everybody want to do that?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I guess the recommendation to take discussion and deliberation offline is concerning to me.
I'm not saying we do that. I'm saying we all give input to each person who's going to collect that input for chapters. We'll get that for the next meeting. Then we'll discuss somebody has to sort of get that stuff, put it together, distill it, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting. We can deliberate over that for the next meeting rather than each one of us go through comments on every single chapter. Because if
Yeah, you don't want to make sausage while you're just sitting here and everybody's just droning over it.
I
Yeah.
agree, but I'm also in the belief that we've started these meetings 5 meetings ago or however long it's been. So we've had plenty of time to have these discussions and to read this document.
That's right.
So I'm counting up the number of potential tasks or sections. Municipal growth, 1. Land use, 2. Housing, 3. Transportation, 4. Community facilities, 5. Arts and culture, 6. 7. Environmental sustainability.
Yeah, it's really
And
the
then I don't, and then I'm not quite sure. how
city
to
sections, the
implementation, but
driving.
There you go,
function of
6
that
or
for the
7.
city.
Okay, those are the key sections. Take your pick. Assign them, do whatever do you follow me?
Mhm.
There you go. Municipal growth, well, let's see. I guess demographic trends in municipal growth. In other words, what have we seen? What are we going to see? Land use, 2. Housing, 3. Transportation, 4. Community facilities, 5. Arts and culture, 6. And environmental sustainability stuff, 7. We have 7 people on the commission. And then implementation.
Water access.
Yeah,
Implementation.
I mean, I think we could put environmental sustainability and water resources together. They're
Yeah,
sort of, I mean, that,
And I'd
You
be
know,
happy to take those together.
okay. So Diane,
anybody else?
I'll do land use.
Demographics and demographic change, trends and land use.
And what are we exactly doing by dividing up each chapter and assigning it to somebody? What are you expecting that person to do?
To read it carefully.
We're gonna each send that person our comments on those chapters. They're gonna put that together. No?
I mean, okay.
Well, I mean, what's your thought, Bob?
Well, I mean, yes, that would be in an ideal world, but we're asking one person to take responsibility to closely read it and to do the best they can to bring to the surface, the major points that are made in that chapter and what the planning commission's response is. And we may edit that. And if you circulate that, we can edit that stuff. And if we have comments, as I read them, I'll send them along to whoever's decided to do transportation.
Well, I think we should all look at all the chapters and
Yes,
send comments to the people designated for those chapters. And then they sort of distill it down and then we'll deliberate over, what each person comes up with for those sections.
And then as a commission, if we have recommended changes, then we should change the document before we send it to the city council.
Yeah,
Well-
I mean, that'll be part of our, hopefully the comments that people have on these sections will, maybe raise areas that we think need to be changed, and that will be a recommendation that gets recorded in our final thing of recommended changes, if we want to do that. So I'll certainly take the housing piece. That's but let's see. So Bob's got 2 and 3, and I can take.
I've got land use.
Oh, you've got, so which ones do you want, Bob?
Well, I'll take land use. I'll try to incorporate what's in the demographic trends and growth because they, you know, they affect the land use decisions.
Right, but I mean, we're gonna be looking at this on a chapter by chapter basis, so we gotta have people's names next to chapters.
All right, I
So-
got 3, 4,
So you're taking 3, 4,
2, 3, 4.
2,
How is
3.
this any different than us going through it chapter by chapter and having us all make comments? Because we're all supposed to read the whole document anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. We're just not gonna do that live tonight, is what I'm saying. We're gonna do that offline. Get those in writing, and then we get them distilled down, then we can actually talk about them rather than just having a free-for-all. What I'm worried about is having a free-for-all in every single chapter. We're gonna be here till midnight, and it's not gonna be productive. So I think we all need to go take time alone. I mean, I got all my notes here, so I gotta just type them up and send them to the right people. I would hope other people have done the same thing. So it's not really that heavy a lift, but I think if we try to, everybody is gonna go through their notes on every chapter, it's just gonna not be productive. That's my feeling, because we're just all gonna be talking all night and go down rat holes, but so that's my suggestion is we divvy the chapters up. Everybody send comments on every chapters, all of the chapters to the people who are going to consolidate the stuff. And then we'll discuss it all in detail when it's not quite a free for all next meeting.
Transportation, community facilities.
Are you
Both of
clicking
them.
that, Ben?
I'll take either one or both if you need. We've got
No, well, you've got
7. Everybody needs to take one, right? Or is it
Ben,
2?
David, and Tom, and there are 3 left.
What do you got? Transportation, facilities?
Transportation, facilities, and arts and culture.
I think community facilities and arts and culture sort of go together.
I don't know. I haven't
I
read
don't
it.
know about
Personally.
that.
But that, Ben, that sounds like it's up your alley.
Sure. Dave's
Facilities.
the arts guy.
Arts and culture.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think I have better taste than him, but I think he'd do a good job at it. Yeah.
David, where are you?
I think he vacated.
Jesus. Well, and then
Sign him in an absentia.
transportation,
I'll take
sign
transportation
Tom.
or the facilities, your choice.
assign something to Tom.
Why don't you take facilities, Ben, since that's kind of your wheelhouse? You're a
Yeah.
facilities guy.
Yeah,
All right.
There you go.
And so we'll leave transportation to
Tom.
Tom. And I have housing.
So if I go through these things and I have thoughts, we should send them to you, Alex, and then you'll disseminate them to the person.
Sorry,
Yeah,
guys. Sorry,
I-
guys. I was in the waiting area trying to be promoted to a panelist, raising my hands. I've been on the whole time.
Okay.
I've been there. I've been in that situation.
He was
So you're
strong.
good, David, with taking the arts and culture piece?
Arts and culture or transportation, either one is fine with me. That's what I was trying to get in, but that's
Huge.
fine.
So
Huge.
yes, to make it simple, so everybody has comments.
I
if
got
you-
what we're doing.
Yeah, if you send them to me, I will chop it up and make sure everybody gets the right stuff. That way
Mhm.
we'll keep the interface clean.
Or how
Okay,
about
good.
we go directly to the person we know has got it, and then we could CC you if you want, get you out of the loop.
I'm happy to play traffic cop. That's fine.
Have an
It'll
arts and
probably
culture
just
thing
be
directly
easier
to
that
him.
way. So,
Alex, can you read off a list again of who's doing what?
okay, so
What's Teresa doing?
Nothing.
Nothing. That's why I'm saying
I
I didn't.
started this, and now she's doing
I don't even know
nothing.
what's left.
You're evil genius. Evil genius.
Could
All
I
right.
ask a favor of Teresa? Maybe it's not a favor. Would you consider taking demographic trends and municipal growth?
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So what I have is Chapters 2 and 3 is Teresa. Chapter 4 is Bob. Chapter 5, Alex. Chapter 6, Tom. 7, Ben. 8, David. And 9 and 10, Diane.
Yep.
Okay, good.
So I
Okay.
got this, I got the 6, Tom. What was 7 and 8 and 9?
7 is Ben.
Yes,
Um,
facilities.
Yep. 8 is
Me?
David.
Dave.
Arts and
Arts
culture.
and culture. You're very
Yes.
cultured, Dave. We respect your.
Sure.
and 9, 10, Diane. Okay, good.
9 is
Uh,
what? Diane?
Chapters 9 and 10, Diane.
Environmental sustainability and water access, or
Yeah,
water resources.
Weapons.
Okay, so now that we have that, so if you guys all have your comments from all of those chapters, send them to me. I'll parcel them out, send, and then send everything to the particular people based on what I just read out.
Okay.
And then in the next meeting, we can discuss all of that input. So for the rest, I think now it's time to continue on making general comments. And so obviously Bob has made a lot of them. Do you have anything else you want to add, Bob, before we go around the horn here?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I'm just going by, who I see, in order here on the screen. So next to me is Teresa. You want to go and give any general comments? Just overall on the plan, things you like, things you don't like.
Yeah, no, I like, I mean, obviously I like the narrative and the way it's drafted. I think it's pretty clear cut and easy to read. I do like that a lot of the background information, is just shows different iterations or, obviously as a comprehensive plan, it shows what the former plans intended, what the future plans hold. There were a couple things that I thought were really insightful, especially like in the demographic stuff. One that really stood out to me is when we got to the demographics of the different wards and so on, and just the population changes and growth, which I thought was interesting about showing just how, for example, areas of downtown haven't really grown at the same rate of areas, closer to like Ward 2 and so on. So that was compelling. I mean, obviously the density and the limited options for development are at play there, but it was just interesting to see it color coded like that. No, I'm trying to find the actual chart that I was looking at. Oh, it was page 39, which was the population by race and ethnicity. So it's just showing, that the predominant demographics along the waterfront, the disparity and inequality between access and water access, from the different populations of groups, depending on where they live. And so I thought just, looking at that map and saying all along the water is all predominantly, blue, and then everything inland is not. So it just shows kind of when we went through different plans for City Dock and others, and some of the discussion at that time was, about, well, this is Maryland, this is Annapolis, everybody has access to water. And it's like, well, not really, and so having some of those waterfront type of plays or public plays of water displays, I think are important, to make sure that everyone has access. So because of that density on that, I noticed that throughout the plan, there really isn't a lot of discussion about how to address that inequality. So even though it was a glaring visual map there of colors versus blue, there wasn't really a plan in there to address, just that inequality. So some things like that. I thought it was nice to see the mention of implications of economic development for the city's own plans, for its own budgets to be allocated to diverse spending. So right now the city doesn't have a policy for any kind of spending within city procurement for women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, so on and so on. And so just those kind of inequities in other cities have shown over the last few decades that having, that carve out of that requirement or incentive to spend, within those diverse communities actually encourages that kind of spend. And just from an anecdotal standpoint, I was wondering how that would, or if there's any kind of policy or potential discussions or thoughts around how that would impact, tenants of downtown, buildings and so on, commercial development. And this is anecdotal, but I was in touch with a few, commercial agents on vacancies downtown in a couple of places. And I called 10. And out of 10 of them, 8 of them told me that they would only lease to national brands or franchise type of businesses, that they were not interested in leasing to a small business or anything like that. And so considering that most national brands aren't going to be woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, and so on, I just thought that considering there's no policies or incentives to do otherwise, not only will the demographics of downtown from a commercial business perspective not change, it's just interesting to see how that could be incorporated or just how that could be addressed to ensure. So, and I know it's kind of off topic, but it was more just, we have all these potential concepts of how things should look or what we'd like to do. And, we talked about this a little bit offline, but it's the implementation that really matters, right? How are those things going to get implemented? So are those policies going to be in place as well, and things that really drive those actions? So that's just the first few chapters. Yeah, that's all I have. I'll provide my comments back on the plan that we laid out.
Okay.
Interesting.
Diane, you have any general comments? What you think of the plan?
Well, I think they kind of, mimic or mirror what Bob was saying about how infinitely better this has been in terms of readability than past plans. The way it is just the outline up front, and then the chapters are just clear. And I love the way, you can turn to any chapter and there's nice maps and there are keys, and if you need to find something, it's pretty easy to reference. And I love having all of the at the very end, the appendix with all of the backup materials that this draws upon. So it has, the credibility is there. The studies are there, whether it's the fiscal analysis or the demographic work that we were talking about, because BAE did spend a significant amount of time working on this. It's just super impressive and looks nice, looks super professional. So I do have specific comments on each chapter, but I've got to go through my notes and put them all together. But we've been doing this for a while, actually since 2019. So I started doing that a couple of days ago, and that's when I found all of our notes from, when Sally Nash was here, and Pete Gutwald, and actually Chris Jakubiak was in some of these early meetings. So I think I'm gonna just go back and draft up the notes and circulate.
Okay, great. Let's see. Next in my view is Ben.
I still believe the comprehensive plan should be general, long range, and focus on the objectives and not have the specific plans for how we're exactly going to address certain things. Because to me, the comprehensive plan that I was briefed by previous, Sally and the gang, it's supposed to be more general. And then your regulatory changes, your strategic plan, your operational plans, and all these sub-plans that come out of it then give you the answer of how you're going to attack all of these items that are pointed out in the comprehensive plan, where the comprehensive plan says this is an item and this needs to be addressed. We then go out with further sub-plans and then address those. So I don't think we need to get too in the weeds in the comprehensive plan further than it does in a lot of places. Of course, there are little modifications here and there. I think they're acceptable, but going into overall depth of how we're going to implement a lot of things in the comprehensive plan doesn't belong there. That's my 2 cents.
All right, thanks. David?
So I agree that I think this is very well written and very easy to read and put together. There's some items that I want to look at a little bit more. I think I've been focusing a lot on the housing issues and not as much on the transportation and arts. But I do think you made some really great points, Teresa, about the water access. It's always been an important part to me of how you can do that. And it's easily accessible and people know it's there. That's going to be a big part of it. But I'm really, I agree with you, Ben, that this should be a guiding document, but it's a guiding document that people use. And they use it when they put together plans and saying whether it conforms to it or not. So I'm really looking forward to us keeping it keeping it general, but also having enough in there that really addresses the current trends, where things are going, and what we're doing, because there is going to be a larger need for a lot of different housing opportunities that we haven't been doing in the past in this area. And whether or not we want those or not is another thing as well, depending on what we want. So, or what's the best. But I'm looking forward to really reviewing this a little bit more and seeing what your guys' ideas are. So thank you.
Great, thanks. So just to,
Alex, I'm sorry, I have a quick question to Ben. So, I mean, I know this thing is huge, it's massive. And there's a lot of things covered in here, but I found it to be pretty high level. So even though it had conceptual stuff and it was pretty, linear in its thoughts, can you provide me, well, I'm trying to make sure I understand where you're coming from when you say that it should be higher. So can you give me an example of like a specific thing in a chapter or an area where it went?
I'm not saying it should be higher. I'm saying we shouldn't go, when you say, how are we going to address the disparity on the waterfront? And there's no plan in here to address that. It's like, well, we're pointing it out and we say it needs to be addressed. And then later on comes regulatory changes, other plans in the city where they can address that. But actually putting a sub-plan type in-depth solution into the comprehensive plan, I don't think is warranted for something like that. You can suggest things and really put on the bush for it, but
if I can add a comment that sort of bridges this gap, I think in this document where the things that Teresa is mentioning, those are basically in the recommended actions. So
They are recommendations,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean
They are in there.
Well, so in each chapter, there are goals in
Yeah.
the chapter and there are recommended actions to achieve those goals, and those actions are they're
The city
generally
council.
fairly broad. They're fairly broad brush. It's guidance for, it's guidance for legislators then to figure out how to go implement it. So just as an example that I can think of is one of the actions is in housing is to make it more easy to build, say, duplexes. But that's as detailed as it's going to get. Then somebody who's going to change legislation has to go figure out, okay,
Right.
what do we do to our zoning code that achieves that, take that recommendation or that recommended action and figure out how to implement it. So
And
it's,
my point was that it was mentioned in the demographics, that the water access at least was mentioned in the demographics, and there is a corresponding or correlating recommendation. But for example, like the multifamily housing is mentioned in its section, but it's also mentioned throughout as a vein of reasoning for other recommendations. It's kind of there.
so
That's
if
what
there are aspects of that are missing from the recommended actions, those are, I think, would be really good things for us to point out for sure. Okay, so my general comments, I think it's very much along the lines with what everybody else has said. I mean, the document's really well organized, and it's things like the introduction that tells you what it is and how to use it. I mean, I don't. That's pretty unique. I've never really seen that in these kinds of documents in the past, and I think that's really important for people who aren't, don't spend their time reading comprehensive plans. So for a citizen or a business owner to pick this up, read that one page that says this is what this thing is and here's how to use it. I mean, I think that's really, really good. Ultimately, I think where I look, what the messages that I got out of this plan, or this document really is it's a really good suggestion on how the city, which is a very, it's a good problem to have. We're a popular place. People want to be here. I'd rather have that problem and all of the things that go along with that problem than a place that's has no economic opportunity, has, people that are leaving in droves. So, this plan ultimately is all about how we can deal with that and grow incrementally and gently without really changing our DNA. of the place. And I think this document does a really good job of that. And I think if there's an implicit guiding principle in this that I get out of it, and you guys have heard me say this, is that, we have to expect that there has to be some change everywhere. So, no neighborhood should be exempt from change, but at the same time, we want to do things not radically. And so, no single family zone should go from, single family detached houses to 5-story apartment buildings. Nobody wants that. And so
Are
the
you
idea
quoting
is,
strong towns?
yeah, well, I mean, that this general philosophy is very much a strong towns principle, is that
Mhm.
you have to allow change in a way that's incremental and gentle and not
Drastic.
radical. And generally, if you try to prevent any change, what you end up with in the end is radical change, because the pressure builds and eventually it blows and you get stuff that's really big. So I like it that all of the discussion in this document and the goals and the recommended actions are all gentle, in the sense that, okay, they are pushing things ahead. They are talking about a little more intensive land uses, but it's not radical. It's doing things similar to what's been done in the past. And I think the discussion the clarification stuff that Eric said it was really good. And and I'll stand by the comment that I made is, prior to 1950, all of the things that this plan recommends are the way we used to always do it, and even before, it was done implicitly. And I think what this plan really does is it dispenses with some of the really negative dogma in the planning world that's been in these plans for the last 50 or 60 years. This sort of, like, as I said, back to the future. And it really dispenses with this, idea of autocentricity, and we have to do everything around making bigger roads and, all that kind of stuff. It's very much around making it a really nice place for people, and all the things that go along with that. So, and I think there's enough specificity in it so that when we do, as a commission, wrestle with this issue of, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan on any particular application that we might see in the future? I really believe the way this document's laid out, and the goals, recommendations, and all of the specific examples that people have talked about and highlighted are really going to be very useful for us to say, yeah, that fits with where the city wants to go, i.e. it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, versus, I think the current plan just doesn't have that kind of stuff. And so it's really nebulous, but I think this plan is going to make that task of ours much, much easier. So anyway, those are my general comments. And, of course I have, more detailed comments that I too will write up. So anybody else have other things? Any specific things that people want to talk about before we adjourn for the night and go off and do some more detailed homework? Okay, good. Well, so we have our plan to get our notes, send them all to me. I'll distribute them all to the people, the key that we've done to look at the comments for each chapter, and then we'll convene in 2 weeks and discuss all of those comments on each chapter in detail. Okay, so at this point, so we'll leave, just a point of order, we'll leave the public hearing open once again until next week. And if there's anybody from the public that wants to make any general comments, or specifically if anybody's watched this and wants to comment on any of the stuff we've talked about, certainly we welcome that feedback. Okay, so we on to the next order of business, which is unfinished business, new business, communications. We have nothing on there, which takes us to the end of our agenda, which is adjournment. And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that emotion and motion.
Emotion, right? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. All right. Anybody who wants to stay on?
Yeah, I just want to talk about calendars. I just looked at our next, did you say that our next planning meeting is on the 21st?
21st.
22nd.
I'm gonna be gone. Could we, gosh,
We may not
Do it
get
the
to your section that night.
the 28th?
Well, it's 14 days from today, so 7 and 14 is 21.
We may not get through all sections in one night. I mean, let's be honest, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
We
Okay,
could-
as long as I get to, yeah, I can go second, or if we do it over two nights, that would be fine.
Okay. Well, yeah, we gotta, I don't want to take this too much further than our next meeting,
Yeah.
because we do have to get our recommendation written up and then voted on and
Right.
then passed to the city council. So each one of those steps, I mean, I suppose if we get enough done 2 meetings from now, you know, we could all agree in principle that we don't have to see the final draft at a meeting to vote on. But Eric, you want to chime in on your need?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that on a practical level, the public hearing has been advertised to end on the 21st. Yeah, we are under some time pressure to pass this on to city council. But at minimum, the public hearing should be closed on the 21st. And then,
Okay.
if the commission needs more time, to kind of get the findings together, that's probably okay. But that's just how it's been advertised. And, we've gotten a few requests to clarify, when the deadline is, and we've been saying noon on the 21st, which would normally be when,
Okay, good.
planning commission comments would be cut off for that evening. So that's what we've been saying. But
Okay. Well, as long as we'll have, another meeting or two after the 21st to get our findings all in order, that's fine.
Mhm.
That's
Okay,
good, thanks.
great. All right. Well, we are adjourned then. You can take us off YouTube, Madeline. Appreciate it.